Yakumo had just finished work, wondering why it was pouring rain tonight. This guy had a body as big as a bull, but he was nearsighted and carried a bag of groceries, presumably just bought. Japanese elders often say that if you walk at night too much, you'll eventually encounter ghosts, especially on rainy nights. Sure enough, Yakumo noticed something unusual. A strange girl lay collapsed by the roadside, looking extremely worn out. Not to mention, she had peculiar ears, a strange tail, and a pair of black wings on her back. Yakumo was startled and asked if she was okay. This vampire girl was exhausted from hunger, her eyes sunken, and her fangs exposed. She whispered, "Please, give me fresh blood, just a mouthful, please." Yakumo knew about these vampires, living by sucking human blood. Generally, they were a cruel species. Hearing the girl's words, he immediately realized she was a vampire. But this was clearly crazy. He looked around frantically for an ambulance nearby. What was going on? He couldn't even believe if this girl was real. However, the girl hadn't harmed him and was now crying and begging. A true man couldn't ignore this. So Yakumo bent down and offered his arm for the girl to bite, starting an interesting story. The girl drank a large gulp of blood, her whole body revitalized. She immediately knelt down and thanked her savior, introducing herself as Sumira, a vampire, and promised to repay him for saving her life. However, Yakumo didn't need anything from the girl, making Sumir think he was a noble samurai, but he insisted he was just an ordinary person. Once again, the girl bowed deeply, earnestly wanting to repay him, which only made Yakumo more uncomfortable. The rain continued to pour incessantly. The two of them had returned to Yakumo's home. After all, he couldn't leave a girl stranded in the rain like that. From Yakumo's words, Sumir learned that this young man was still single and always lived alone. He apologized to her for the mess, explaining that he rarely had guests. Knowing there was no one else around, Sumir immediately drooled and praised him as the perfect human for a vampire. It would be terrifying if these words came from a male vampire, but her demeanor was more like a kitten. All right, it was time to use the techniques she had learned over the years at vampire school. Sumir offered to help Yakumo as a way to repay him for saving her life, but he insisted he didn't need any help. This was a real dilemma for her, forcing her to think hard. Then she activated her thermal vision, scanning the young man. Oh dear, she discovered that his blood circulation wasn't very good. Yakumo explained that it was due to his sedentary job. Indeed, that was the case, so Sumir decided to use this as an excuse to give him a massage. Yakumo blushed, wanting to refuse since they had just met. However, he couldn't say no because Sumir was begging so intensely, bowing her head to the ground with her butt in the air. Unexpectedly, this vampire girl wasn't a professional masseuse. She had to pull out a book and read the basic massage techniques. This was her first time too, but when she sat on Yakumo's back, Sumir felt like she was riding a wild horse. He was so big, oh dear. Yakumo shyly explained that he had always been like that since he was a kid. Currently, he was 208 centimeters tall and weighed 120 kilo. All right, Sumir began her work. She pressed her thumbs down hard on his spine, applying strong pressure. She let out a heavy sigh herself and asked Yakumo if he felt any pleasure. Well, aside from a bit of a tickling sensation, he didn't feel much of anything. Her words left her feeling a bit disappointed, but she decided to try a different approach. This time, she pressed down on his back with both feet. Now Yakumo finally felt his back muscles getting a real massage, and a look of relaxation spread across his face. Outside, the rain continued pouring down. Inside, the two of them had finished up. Sumir clung tightly to Yakumo's large arm, complimenting him with a satisfied smile, saying he wasn't just kind-hearted, but also brimming with fresh blood, which tasted amazing. Yakumo, she declared, was the most delicious person in the world. Completely unaccustomed to praise like this, Yakumo couldn't help but ask her, just what did his blood taste like exactly? Without hesitation, Sumir dove into her culinary vocabulary to describe it, saying his blood had a deep, fragrant, and delicious taste with a slight spiciness. After drinking it, she was left with a feeling like a refreshing summer breeze. Yakumo listened, amazed at the delicacy of her taste and language. Then she decided that it wouldn't be fair if she was the only one enjoying something delicious. Her benefactor deserved a good meal too. So, she went off to prepare a delightful dinner, but she couldn't even tell the difference between sugar and salt. Even the gas stove seemed foreign to her, so how could she possibly cook? Still, stopping a girl who's trying to express her feelings is a crime, so Yakumo could only let her continue. She poured oil into the pan with gusto, cooking and singing as she went. Unexpectedly, the large flame caught onto the excess oil, creating a 3-meter-high pillar of fire. Samir screamed in fright, while Yakumo quickly grabbed the pan lid to cover it, reminding her to turn off the stove. In the end, Sumir's sweet and sour pork ribs turned into a charred, blackened mess. She could only kneel down and burst into tears, blaming herself for failing to do anything to repay him. Putting that aside, though he wasn't one to pry, Yakumo felt compelled to ask why she had collapsed there in the first place. Sumir's eyes widened, and she reluctantly began to tell her story. She came from a world of vampires, a place with strict rules. As a dropout who couldn't even drink blood properly, there was no place for her in that world anymore. She could no longer go back. Sumir forced a smile, wondering aloud why life had to be so hard, though tears streamed down her face at the same time. Seeing this, Yakumo could only pat her head, realizing that neither the human world nor the vampire world was easy to navigate. All right, he now knew everything he needed to know. Yakumo decided to give her a place to stay. This generosity left her stunned and emotional, though she hoped Yakumo wouldn't think of her as a troublesome girl. Then Sumir climbed onto his back like a little kitten, thanking him repeatedly. Now he would go prepare a warm bath for her. After all, she was chilled from the rain. The warm water from the shower washed over her, bringing the exhausted girl back to life. Sumir soaked in the warm bath, feeling a deep sense of relief. From now on, she wouldn't have to bathe in rivers or hide in dark, filthy alleys, as she now had a new home. Tears welled up again as she thought of her past hardships. Such a blessing could only have been granted by God. Thank God, oh thank God, she cried until her eyes turned red, then told Yakumo that it was only due to the warm water. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the moon hung high in the crystal-clear night sky. Sumir stepped out of the room in a fresh outfit. Clearly, there were no dresses in her host's closet, so it was one of Yakumo's t-shirts. But look how happy she was. And today, as the pesky sun rises, marks the first day Sumir fulfills her mission to serve her master. While Yakumo is still sound asleep, she'll make him breakfast. Bread will be the main course, though Sumir still doesn't understand why humans feel the need to warm it up when they can eat it right away. A salad will balance the nutrition, and there's some soup here too. Meanwhile, Yakumo has thoughtfully used cloths to cover the 2 glass panes, shielding the room from sunlight. Such a considerate guy. Breakfast will consist of 2 slightly burnt toast slices, a cup of ramen noodles, and a dish of shredded greens from the store. Even though she finds human food unnecessarily complicated, Sumir hopes her master will be pleased with this breakfast menu. The more she looks at her work, the prouder Sumir feels, convinced it's perfect. And now it's time to wake her master up. First, he'll thank her for waking him, then thank her for the wonderful breakfast. Oh dear, just imagining it makes Sumir drool with happiness. It's truly the perfect plan of a useful vampire, and she'll definitely get a head pat like a little kitten. So, with glee, she dashes into Yakumo's room, secretly hoping to sneak a little taste of fresh blood. But as she reaches the door, Yakumo suddenly opens it, looking drowsy, and mumbles a sleepy, "Good morning." Her plan falls apart and she nearly cries, scolding her master for waking up on his own. Oh, it was just his alarm going off, that's all. Enough of this. It turns out the true culprit is that cursed alarm clock. She decides she'll burn it alive in the deadly sunlight. Later, as Yakumo eats breakfast, he notices how clean and tidy the living room is today. Sumir immediately steps up to claim credit, saying she took advantage of the time while Yakumo was sleeping to get it all done. Isn't it great? Yakumo thanks her. He then praises her, calling her a good girl and giving her head pats non-stop. Sumir, basking in the praise and head pats, feels dopamine rushing through her. At this point, Yakumo realizes she truly resembles a little puppy. After that, he gets dressed and heads to work, and Sumira makes sure to wish him a good day. But now sleepiness starts to set in from waking up so early. Is there anywhere she could take a nap? She usually sleeps in a coffin, but that's been left behind. So, she finds 2 cardboard boxes, tapes them together, and successfully creates a makeshift coffin to sleep in. Sumir sleeps soundly, unaware of how much time has passed. She even scolds herself for sleeping as soundly as a log. Time to get up and put her clothes back on. She ties her hair up neatly. All set, now she's ready for her afternoon shift. She wonders if her laundry has dried yet. Luckily, when she opens the door, the sun doesn't shine into this part of the apartment complex in the afternoon, so Sumir can safely retrieve her clothes. She takes her master's shirt and brings it to her nose, breathing in the scent, which has been slightly toasted by the sun's intense rays. Yet there's something strangely captivating about it. Deep within, it carries Yakumo's scent, like the ocean breeze on a tropical island in the middle of the night. Somehow this scent stirs her appetite intensely. Her stomach rumbles loudly, and she feels weak with hunger. But since her master gave her blood just yesterday, Sumire reminds herself to endure it today. She can't be that childish. Even as she tells herself this, her mind drifts to Yakumo's strong, large, and delicious-looking body, and she can't help but drool. She has to ask for more blood. After all, her master's body is so big. Surely one sip, no, 2 sips, wouldn't hurt. Night falls, but Yakumo still hasn't come home. It turns out he's had a rough day, not returning until 11 p.m. Practically dragging himself through the door. The moment he opens the door, without even a chance to apologize for being late, he's met with Sumire's embrace. Oh, this girl is starving to the point of madness, and it's all Yakumo's fault. She's drenched in sweat, her eyes twinkling with little heart shapes, and so she drinks her master's blood in that moment. She then kneels down, apologizing because her mind had gone completely blank. But Yakumo isn't upset, thinking it was his fault. They decide to stay in touch by phone to avoid a similar situation in the future. The next day, Yakumo came home quite early. After changing clothes, he informed the little cat clinging to him that tomorrow was the weekend, which meant a day off. Oh, Sumire just learned about another amazing concept: time off. She immediately started dancing with joy, thrilled that her master would spend the whole day with her tomorrow. Yakumo then mentioned that they'd be going shopping today, which made Sumire leap with excitement. She wanted to leave right away. However, her clothes were a bit unusual for going out, and unfortunately, it was the only outfit she had. Dressing this noticeably would attract attention, so Yakumo suggested he might go out alone this time. As soon as he said that, she threw herself to the floor in protest, shouting, "I want to go! I want to go!" She added that she could even shrink her wings and tail like this. All right. Yakumo wrapped a scarf around her as well. He didn't want her revealing too much of herself for others to see. The two of them headed to a supermarket on Saturday evening. Once inside, Sumire was completely overwhelmed by the vast space and the abundance of goods. Most of the store was stocked with food for humans. She realized that food was so readily available and abundant for humans. They'd built an entire system to supply it quickly, unlike her own vampire kind. It was truly something to envy, but she felt lucky to have met her own endless food source and jumped up onto his shoulders amidst the crowd, drawing quite a bit of attention, though most people were looking at Yakumo because of his large build. Now, since they were out of meat at home, they'd buy that first. Sumire could only watch in fascination, admiring how the fresh meat was packaged and chilled, staying perfectly fresh and even sliced neatly into pieces. She decided to buy a dozen packs of fresh meat, hoping Yakumo could produce tons of delicious fresh blood with this amount, though it was probably too much. And her keen sense of smell was telling her something. This was garlic-marinated meat, a deadly poison for vampires. Sumire immediately covered her nose and shouted that this was humanity's trap, and they should stay far away from it. This toxin would first paralyze Sumire's limbs, then stop her from breathing. It was truly the scent of death. Hearing this dramatic description, Yakumo guessed it was similar to eating pufferfish. Oh, Yakumo even understood what Sumire was angrily muttering. All right, so that was shopping. But suddenly, Yakumo glanced over to the other side. There were clothes on display over there, and it was just in time to get some for Sumire. She was about to tell him to buy something cheap, but hearing this, Sumire immediately got excited. She rushed over to pick out clothes, and Yakumo generously told her to get whatever she liked. This one seemed a bit tight in the chest, looking as if it might burst. Yakumo quietly admired, convinced her size must be an L. Sumire then went to change into another outfit, in line with her own sense of style. Now she looked just like an ordinary human woman, and Yakumo found it quite acceptable. All right, their total came to 3,120 yen. Meanwhile, the cashier was nosy, questioning why Yakumo was out with a little girl at this late hour, and looking at him, he didn't seem like the girl's parent at all. Wow, this nosy old lady really made the protagonist uneasy. Sumire immediately came up with a way to save her master. She confidently asserted that they were in a romantic relationship, causing Yakumo to break into a sweat. He hurriedly explained that this was a little cousin of his, and he was just looking after her. While patting her head and pretending to tell her not to play adult games, Sumire didn't understand. Should she really tell them that her master had picked her up off the street? Damn, that would be even worse. Until now, Yakumo was still feeling his heart racing and his legs trembling. Anyway, they had successfully passed that hurdle, and now they were heading home. For some reason, this mischievous girl was laughing. It turned out that for her, this was one of the happiest memories of her life. She had never felt this joyful before. Goodness, she truly was a pitiful girl. Suddenly, Sumire ran ahead. They had just walked this path, so she decided to take a different route to explore, and Yakumo could only chase after her. Unbeknownst to them, someone witnessed this scene. It was a girl who was an acquaintance of his. She recognized Yakumo immediately. But who was the little girl accompanying him? It seemed something was about to happen. The vampire girl bared her fangs and ran down the street at night. The streets were completely empty, and she felt delighted. The night was the world of vampires, and now she was invincible, even tossing aside her scarf. Suddenly, Sumire smelled something. Was someone following them? This made Yakumo a bit uneasy, knowing that her sense of smell was rarely wrong. Sure enough, she had detected the stalker who was hiding behind that utility pole. After Sumire called out, a strange girl stepped forward, looking fearful. Yakumo immediately recognized her as someone familiar, while the vampire girl quickly wrapped her scarf back around herself to hide her identity. At that moment, the girl pointed at Sumire and demanded to know who she was. However, Sumire thought she should be the one asking that question. Without a doubt, Sumire believed this girl was the bane of her family, someone drawn by the delicious scent of her master. Yet Yakumo could only sigh and explain that this girl wasn't like Sumire at all, and Sumire took another sniff. She even leaned in closer to get a better whiff of the girl. Oh, then Sumire reached a conclusion. These two were related by blood. Yes, Yakumo was her younger brother, and this girl was his older sister. That was also why these two smelled quite similar, though the other girl had no idea what was going on. Yakumo's older sister, named Minori, looked over the girl with him, noting that she seemed quite young, so young that Minori felt concerned. Damn, could her little brother possibly be in some kind of shady relationship with a runaway schoolgirl? Yakumo could only panic and deny it. Now Yakumo suggested that Sumire should tell the truth, as lying to family was shameful. Blushing, Sumire admitted that Ren-san and she were life partners. Wow, that was quite an answer. Minori was shocked to find out that this girl was a vampire, but she dismissed it, thinking that the girl must be going through an overly imaginative phase. Sumire grew angry, convinced that Minori was mocking her. Fine. If Minori didn't believe her, Sumire would show her a full display of feeding, as she stuck out her tongue and began licking her prey's neck. Horrified, Minori jumped forward and pulled Sumire back. The two flared up, feathers ruffled, and immediately started fighting over who Ren truly belonged to. Alright, now Minori believed that the girl was a vampire, but that didn't mean she was going to let this girl take over her little brother. She brandished a cross, summoning the power of Christ. Incidentally, this cross was made from two disposable chopsticks, yet Sumire remained unfazed. No holy power appeared at all. Minori was thoroughly disappointed. Did she really need to dive in, rip out her heart, or use silver bullets to get rid of her? Sumire confirmed, saying those two options would indeed work, but the disposable chopsticks wouldn't. Another way to kill a vampire, according to Sumire, was to use garlic, a tip she generously shared with Minori. Oh, what a clueless vampire. With everything now explained, Ren informed Minori that the vampire girl was currently living with him. Minori could only sigh. Her little brother was always too kind to everyone. While people have their own ideas about what's appropriate, and neighbors tend to notice things, so Minori decided to invite Sumire to stay at her place instead. After all, they were both women, which would make things easier and healthier. This suggestion caught Sumire by surprise. In a flash, she bit Minori on the hand. Your blood's a bit fat. Please exercise more and check back with me. This made Minori fume with rage, calling her a little brat. Minori immediately charged into combat with the vampire girl, and Ren had to shout to stop them, telling them that fighting wouldn't solve anything. Ren really had authority in the family. With just one sentence, he ended the chaos. All right, Sumire suggested they shake hands to make peace, but she deliberately used too much force, making Minori's hand hurt terribly. Minori's face turned red with anger as she cursed Sumire, calling her a damn chimpanzee, while Ren was speechless, not knowing how to handle the situation. The evening came to an end and they wished each other good night. But the truth is, Sumire can't sleep at night. and now she's trying to figure out a way to curb her blood cravings. Even though Ren lets her drink once a day, worried that asking for too much blood might make her master sick, she has to come up with a plan for this. And this is the perfect time to use the notebook she kept from her school days. She started reading it carefully and found that milk could help reduce her hunger. So, she decided to have 2 servings of milk and 1 of blood, which would help her manage her cravings while keeping Ren healthy. But to buy milk, she needs human money, though the notebook had a note saying, "Be careful, CTS." What could that mean? Ah, right. It turns out her teacher had angrily written it when she'd fallen asleep in class, adding some extra lines. Although some parts are still unreadable, she knows she can buy milk at the store. And in this little purse, there's a bit of emergency money Ren provided for urgent needs. So, Sumir decided to take the money and go to the supermarket they visited last time. She was sure that after one visit she would remember the way. However, she ended up getting lost, standing alone in the middle of the desolate street. While she was still confused, a figure appeared behind her. The person told her that a young woman shouldn't be wandering around alone at night. Oh, it was Minori. Sumir immediately shot back that wasn't Minori also young and out alone? Minori retorted that she was a grown woman and was just coming home from work. But why was Sumir out here? Sumir, determined, declared that she might be wandering, but she was definitely not lost. Ah, turns out she was lost. What a terrible lie. It turned out that she was out to buy milk. Minori had indeed heard that breast milk was quite similar to blood, but it still didn't make much sense. By the way, if it was milk she needed, there was a convenience store near her house that sold it. And so Sumir ended up buying 2 bags full of milk. With this amount, it would definitely relieve some pressure off Ren. However, she just now noticed that half of it was imitation milk. Oh, actually, it was yogurt. Sumir immediately rolled onto the road in frustration, believing she had once again fallen into a trap set by humans. Wow, this girl was really more foolish than Minori thought. The poor girl opened the yogurt container in a terrible way and began to enjoy her yogurt. Indeed, it tasted delicious and would help her get through her hunger. Since she had bought too much yogurt by mistake, Sumir had to think of a way to deal with it. Throwing it away would be a waste, so she decided to give it a try. Wow, she didn't expect that this drinkable yogurt would be even closer to human blood. She should have drunk it first. But for some reason, right after drinking it, her stomach started growling loudly. It was not good at all. Damn it, it was just another trap. Sumir dashed into the bathroom at supersonic speed. Turns out the note next to her entry in the notebook read, "Be careful with similar products." The sun rose again and Ren woke up. Instead of chirping like every day, today Sumir looked extremely haggard and exhausted. She could only say that she was on a diet, and this terrible lie didn't fool Ren. Eventually, the girl recounted everything to Ren. Indeed, Sumira sadly said that she didn't want to add any burden to Ren's health. Looking at this poor girl was heartbreaking, and especially since she was such a kind girl, Ren generously offered her another meal in the morning as a celebration. But Sumir refused, saying that it was like putting the cart before the horse. But saying that, she immediately couldn't hold back and lunged at Ren to drink his blood enthusiastically. Tonight's sky is full of stars, but Ren hasn't come home yet. He's being tortured by a new project, and it feels awful. Not only can he not go home, but he also has to go up to the rooftop to call and apologize to his client, enduring a verbal lashing over the phone. On his way home, he grumbled about that overly demanding client, blaming the insane deadline they'd set at the beginning. And Ren entered the house in that state, tired and drained. As soon as he opened the door, Sumir leapt straight at him, clinging to him like a little puppy. She loudly welcomed him home, saying she'd been waiting for him. Clearly, he had forgotten about this. There was always someone who was happy when he came home. Unlike before, when he used to be all alone every day, now he truly had a little puppy clinging to his back. In some way, life had gotten better, hadn't it? Sumir asked if he'd come home later than usual, because it was almost the next day. Oh, today was a dreadful day for Ren. He told Sumir that he'd spent the entire day just apologizing to clients, juggling so much and wishing he had an extra pair of hands. Seeing her master's weary face, Sumir immediately dropped down on her knees, raising her hips high, and told him to let her handle the apologies next time. She's really good at it. Oh wow, Ren had to compliment her. That was a legendary doggies pose. All right, time to set work aside because she'd just finished preparing dinner. Hearing that she spent the whole day making it, Ren's face showed a bit of concern. He could only hope it wouldn't be as disastrous as the first time she cooked. Tada! She revealed her dish, Salisbury steak, and it actually looked quite delicious. But the kitchen was a disaster, like a battlefield had erupted there. After the meal, Ren was supposed to bathe in the bath that Sumire had prepared for him, but he was ready to let her go in first. In the end, this was Sumire's show of sincerity, so he couldn't refuse. So Ren took the bath first, doing his best not to let the water spill out everywhere. After that, it was Sumire's turn, but by then, the water had completely run out. Ren lay down on the floor, exhausted, while the TV played a variety show in the background. At that moment, he suddenly thanked Sumire, saying that today had been tough, but thanks to her, he'd give his best again tomorrow. Those words made the vampire girl blush, but there was another reason for it. She'd been hoping for a reward in the form of blood. Oh, but he'd already fallen asleep. Sumire looked at him with pity. After an exhausting day at work, he still came home to let her feed on him. Sumire could only cradle his head in her lap affectionately. Then she turned off the lights and went to sleep. Little did they know, not far away, there were two strange figures lurking. Two other female vampires had caught the scent of a vampire living among humans, and they decided they'd have to check it out. While Ren was fast asleep, the petite girl decided to tidy up the mess she'd made in the kitchen. Suddenly, she caught a strange scent lingering in the air. Someone had approached their front door. Sumire peered through the door's peephole, trying to see who it was. A quick scuffle ensued, and the noise forced Ren to wake up in distress. In front of him were two female vampires, one big and one small, who had bound Sumire tightly like a mummy. The larger girl turned around, smiled, and sincerely apologized for waking him up. Ren was horrified. These two were clearly the same kind of creature as Sumire. Faced with two intimidating figures holding weapons, Ren quickly offered up his wallet as a tribute, only to be taken aback when the larger girl greeted him politely and introduced herself as Dahlia, making him feel a bit safer. But a second later, Dahlia swiftly raised her sword, planning to turn Ren into a quick snack to silence him. Damn, he had clearly misjudged her nature. Even while bound, Sumire screamed out, begging them not to harm her Ren. Immediately, a sword was pressed against her neck, and she was told to shut up. All Sumire could do was cry and apologize. Just then, Ren rushed forward, grabbing Dahlia's sword and demanding that she not harm Sumire. The vampire sighed, clearly not very skilled at handling such situations. She turned to her friend beside her, asking if they should just cut off both their heads to eliminate the evidence. Her friend replied that doing so wouldn't destroy the evidence. They just needed to hold on a little longer. It seemed the two of them were acquainted, and they needed to sort that out a bit. Dahlia readily agreed, cheerfully leaving the thinking to her friend Kikyu, and afterward she would just say that she thought the same thing. A round of interrogation began, with Kikyu complimenting Sumire on her luck in finding this young man. Meanwhile, Dahlia clearly didn't care and had already fallen asleep. Knowing that Ren had saved one of their kin and kept it secret, Kikyu thanked him. Now they planned to take Sumire with them, but Sumire immediately refused, not wanting to go. She even crawled on the ground like a worm to Ren, saying they were getting along well and that she didn't need to return home. She only wanted to live here. As for Ren, he was perfectly happy to have Sumire around. Before he could say much, Kikyu interjected, pointing out that while the two of them might get along well, it would throw the vampire world into chaos. Then Dahlia, the brute, declared coldly that because of this, Sumire should quietly come along. Her words, paired with the deadly aura she emitted, left the two of them pale with fear. Dahlia fiercely stepped forward and grabbed Sumire by the collar, but Sumire wanted no part of it. Just then, Ren caught Dahlia's wrist to stop her, while holding Sumire tightly with his other arm. He said that since Sumire had no place in the vampire world and had been left to collapse in the rain, now claiming they wanted to bring her back was far too convenient, wasn't it? This defense moved Sumire to look up at Ren, tears welling in her eyes. Dahlia only laughed, saying that such words would be better spoken to the one who raised Sumire, while they were simply doing their job here. But Ren wasn't ready to let go, and the two ended up locked in a standoff. Clearly, his strength was no small matter. This young man was too stubborn, so Dahlia could only ask Kikyu whether they should get rid of him. This was the tensest moment. Kikyu could only sigh, understanding that they were in the wrong. They couldn't just take the girl away like this. She also understood Ren's stance and the strength of his resolve. So, Kikyu used her magic to prepare to disappear, saying she would report back and seek her superior's advice, reminding Dahlia to wait here. All right, even though Kikyu was known as a gentle vampire, It was part of why Dahlia enjoyed working with her, so now she released Sumire. Dahlia sprawled on the floor. Overhead were several bats chattering non-stop, possibly the way vampires communicated. Then one bat angrily shouted something in an incomprehensible language, while Dahlia cheerfully jotted down Ren's name. The meeting concluded, and Kikyu returned. Sumire immediately hid behind Ren. Kikyu then announced that she would now take full control of the situation. She confirmed that Sumire had indeed been attending that particular class, so it made sense that she didn't want to return to the vampire world. Ren wondered what kind of class it could be to make her feel that way. In any case, Sumire had still broken the rules, but luckily for her, she had somehow found a favorable situation. The final decision from her superiors was that Sumire could live experimentally among humans, provided she had a specialized instructor and an escort. In this case, Kikyu would be the instructor, and Dahlia the escort. Hearing this, Sumire jumped up and hugged her master's neck. Her wish had finally come true. Ren was just as happy. He hadn't lost his adorable little pup. Now they needed to arrange their new living space, so Dahlia quickly claimed the empty room next door for convenience. The next evening, the two of them were now setting up a shared base by linking the two rooms. As soon as Ren came home, he saw that the girl was using a sword to cut through the wall, a time-saving shortcut for the vampires between their rooms. Kikyu had assigned the tasks. Young Ren would be responsible for finances, while Sumire would handle the housework. She was even timing herself to see if she could complete her tasks on schedule. And now it was time to prepare dinner for Ren. Let's see what Sumire could do. Sumire's eyes sparkled with determination. She would try her absolute best. Dinner was ready. A dish called the Sea and the Mountain of Rice. Kikyu couldn't hide the anger in her eyes and sternly reminded the girl not to play with her food. But Sumire argued that she was being completely serious. So Kikyu explained to Sumire that, while humans may live in abundance now, they must never forget how hard it was to secure food in the past. Dahlia loved sharing stories of those old days and hoped next time she could tell one about Romeo and Juliet. For now, Kikyu asked to borrow Dahlia's Nokogiri sword and ordered Sumire to pull down her trousers. A strict lesson followed, bringing the story to a close for now. What do you think of this tale? Leave your comments below for everyone to see, and finally, we wish you a wonderful day and look forward to seeing you again.